Gentlemen, the time has come once again to discuss things.
Everyone, welcome to another episode of Geeky Gentlemen. I am Sid Part 2. Joining me today is...
A geek for fun.
And a sad for fun.
It's a sad one. Tonight we are going to be discussing the recent passing, the legacy, the iconography, the career, the life of one Mr. Akira Toriyama. It is really sad news. It's been a couple weeks now. We weren't quite able to all get together, and I didn't want to do this episode without all of us. So it's been a couple weeks since Toriyama's passing. Obviously, just heartbreaking news when that dropped. That they let us know like about a week after it happened, if I remember correctly.
Right.
And it just that one was a real rough one, especially within like just the online Dragon Ball community. This is like the biggest, I think, celebrity death that's like hit me as being like a part of the community that they're involved with. I think the only thing that comes close was like when Carrie Fisher passed a couple years back. But even then, this is like just the outpouring of reaction, support, heartache, disappointment, that happened from this one. I don't think I've been as close to with any other like big notable figure passing.
Yeah, I feel very much the same. Obviously anyone knows that a lot of my entire YouTube thing, and even in a lot of ways me even being on here, is very directly related to Dragon Ball and Toriyama's other work. So when that news came out, it floored me. I didn't realize it was real. I didn't realize it was actually a thing that could even happen. Like, he's always kind of had that. You see just the avatar. You don't really see a lot of photos of him, especially like modern photos. He doesn't do voice interviews or anything like that. So he almost had this aura of actually being just a tiny little robot doodle and not actually being a real person who created all of these things. So there was this kind of energy around him of like being, oh, someone's just going to be around forever. So it definitely was super, super sad. The thing I definitely want to focus on, which I thought was a really interesting thing, and I think is a kind of an interesting topic to talk about artists and like the legacy artists leave behind when their work outlives them, is what you mentioned, Ian, about the sheer outpouring, not just from like, and this is, Dragon Ball's interesting because we've had so many different versions of it, not just in terms of like what's actually official, but in terms of different dubs, different translations, different eras of kids that grew up with it on Nicktoons with Kai, or people who grew up with it on Toonami, or even the Ocean dub and stuff. And then you get to the different countries, Latin America's relationship with Dragon Ball, Japan's relationship with Dragon Ball. All of those different things for the longest time have kind of been like against each other. There's been very much a people who don't like this specific version versus this version, and there's a lot of elitism when it comes to that. But here it kind of paid off in a very unexpected way when you realize this was a very rare case where, unlike, say, Carrie Fisher's passing with Star Wars is pretty much broken up into two main groups, where you'll have the casual people who see the movies, and then the people who will just go outside of the outside material and will dive deeper into it, and then that will splinter off into the different sections, but it's mainly just one type of person, especially like ethnic groups and demographics and stuff, and English speaking normally. Again, not to generalize, but I think that's a fair assumption. Whereas with Dragon Ball, you'll have people from all walks of life who are even just vaguely heard about Dragon Ball. I had because I follow like NBA Twitter and stuff like that. A lot of NBA players just changing their profile pictures to like Vegeta or Stephen A. Smith coming on his show talking about Akira Toriyama. It's like, that's it. Why is this circle of crew talking about Dragon Ball? Like, it's a completely different community from, like, say, the one we operate, and then you go onto the artist spectrum, and you've got Jorge Jimenez drawing tribute pieces to Dragon Ball, and all of these different things from, like, basically every area of pop culture and the current modern day, I guess, like, online experience has had a little bit of a Dragon Ball footprint, and that's kind of incredible. Like, that is truly feels like it's unprecedented in terms of so many different people talking about it.
Yeah. Steve, how about you?
Yeah, I mean, this one's rough. This one just feels like it came out of nowhere, which in a little ways it did. But it, especially when you compound it with Takahashi dying last year, the person who created Yu-Gi-Oh! So you go from losing Yu-Gi-Oh! To losing Dragon Ball creator back to back, and that's a rough one. But then you also had Neil Adams and Dennis O'Neil dying recently too. So it just feels like a cascade of really influential people from my childhood are just dropping like fucking flies. Last year I made a really big attempt to make sure I got to a convention so I could get Steve Englehart to sign a copy of my Batman comics, because I knew he was also probably not going to be staying around here much longer. So in that vein, I didn't believe that the news happened, and Dragon Ball was a really big part of my childhood. As I grew up, I started to sort of drift away from it, and I came back a little bit during Super, mostly for the movies, but it was always kind of on the periphery, and it goes as far back as like Batman and Dragon Ball were my two things as a kid, and making a lot of friends growing up in elementary school and middle school, and even into high school. We would talk about Dragon Ball. We would talk about whatever new shonen was out at the time. A lot of when we were like kids talking about Naruto chapters coming out on a weekly basis, we would sprinkle in stuff like, oh, that's a Dragon Ball reference right there, and stuff like that. Or we would like be watching we would be talking about the video releases about like how all of the different versions of Dragon Ball getting released and all of the ways it's cropped or messed up or dubbed and stuff, and different opinions about the music and shit. So like a lot of my geeky community history is Dragon Ball, and Dragon Ball, like Alfie mentioned, kind of transcends because of just how many diverse groups of people remember this and how influential it was. Toriyama is really up there as probably one of the most influential comic book creators of all time, if not of all time. And there's a lot of stuff going around right now that we don't think of as having influences in Dragon Ball, but definitely do. I mean, you're talking about stuff that's been going on for decades now. Franchises that have been around since the late '90s that wouldn't exist without Dragon Ball. It's hard to imagine that you're in a world now where the guy who created all that is gone, but how everyone has reacted in a way that feels so positive compared to what you normally see when celebrities die or something happens like this. I was shocked to see just like the sheer amount of good, wholesome people getting together talking about how great Dragon Ball is without trying to be elitist. And maybe I'm just on the good quarters of the internet these days, but that made me feel pretty good.
No, I mean, honestly, the take that I saw that like instantly resonated with me, that's on the same vibe, Steve, is everyone collectively mourning Akira Toriyama's passing is the closest to world peace I think we'll ever get. It's like, no, but like for real, there wasn't like you're right, I didn't see anyone like throwing shade of like, oh, you weren't a real Dragon Ball fan, and I'm sure like it existed, it just didn't. Yeah. It didn't rise to the top like it usually does, right? Like, no one felt the need to try to, like, have the take on his passing. Or if they probably made the attempt, but, like, people didn't let it happen. because I just never saw any of that. It was so crazy to see just the tremendous outpouring. I linked it in the chat because Alfie brought it up earlier, but yeah, the Jimenez drawing of Goku going Super Saiyan as a tribute to Toriyama just absolutely floored me, and just broke my heart all over again. I couldn't believe it. And then he fucking colored it and did it again. It was this was like the roughest one, and you're right. The number of people affected from so many different communities is absolutely insane. That it's kind of hard to believe this happened the way it did.
Yeah, I mean, Toriyama was the gateway to anime for an entire generation of people. You know, like anime in the West would not have taken off the way it did without Dragon Ball.
Absolutely.
One thing.
So Alfie, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah,
go ahead.
one thing I wanted to bring it back to specifically the man himself, and kind of something I want to talk about is the idea we talk a lot of like legends, right? And it's very rare that we get to live in the lifetime of someone who is absolutely like legendary, and not just in the case of that being hyperbolic or that being, it's like, no, like this is something that has fundamentally changed sequential art for the rest of human history. And I don't think that's an exaggeration. Like I legitimately believe fights will never be drawn the same way. Pre and post Toriyama will be like a textbook thing eventually, no matter how far we get, even if that's not the exact words we use, but just the language of the rapid fire punch. Even something as simple as the power up, right? And how we take that for granted, like the raw key charge and your hair standing on end, and the Super Saiyan iconography, even boiling away from all of that, just how he drew kicks, how he drew punches, and the minimum of real estate. If you ask any comic artist or mangaka artist or any kind of sequential artist that knows their stuff, Toriyama is always going to be listed as a reference, as like an undeniable master at it. And one story I want to share, which I think just makes that even more insane, is Toriyama never wanted to become a manga artist. He didn't train for that at all. He was in advertising as a graphic designer. This was when he was 25. Like, he used to draw a lot as a kid, and he used to watch a lot of kung fu films and plenty of that, so he'd have textbooks of drawings and stuff, but he never wanted to be a manga artist, never wanted to be an animator. But he hated formal jobs. He hated getting a dress code. He hated having to turn up on time, all of that stuff. So after living with his parents for a long time and having to borrow money from everything, he saw a Shonen magazine was offering a contest for like manga artists, and it would be the equivalent of, you'd get $8,000 for the prize of it if it was in today's money. He submitted and then he lost. He didn't get any. He was like dead last, and then he kept doing these contests for many years because he could work fast, so he could submit to a lot of them. But a lot of the editors just said that his work was no good. One editor eventually came back to him, called Hiroshima, and Hiroshima became influenced a lot of Toriyama's work, with a lot of his villains becoming based off him. The main villain in Dr. Slump is literally like drawn to exactly look like his editor. Frieza has a lot of Toriyama in him. Dr. Jirao as well was famously rejected by Toriyama, and then he sent the androids in and they got rejected, and then he eventually settled on Cell. But even then, he was still rejected a lot of the time, until he submitted a mangaka about a doctor who created a robot girl. And he said, "Oh, this is great, but can you just make the protagonist the robot girl? Because people seem to like your girls more than your guys." And he was like, "Okay, fine, but I'm still calling it Dr. Slump as like a protest." And then at 27, he finally got published in Shonen Jump with Dr. Slump. And Dr. Slump became wildly popular. He became a millionaire thanks to Dr. Slump. He had basically a dream career of struggling and not meaning to become an artist and just drawing comedy manga for, I think, Dr. Slump ran for maybe 7 years, maybe 10. I don't have the exact numbers for that. It could have been longer. So he had all of this. What a success story. What a great story. And then at the end of Dr. Slump's run, he was like, well, I'm already successful. You know what would be super cool? What if I just made Dragon Ball? Which is insane, right? Like, that is fucking nuts.
It's such a wholesome fucking story. And I think there's always a temptation to throw around the idea of like the creative genius and the idea that someone is just like so incredibly talented, when often these things are more complex than that. My kind of go-to example is usually like George Lucas and Star Wars. Like, people talk about Lucas in some circles as if like everything Star Wars he just created himself, and like when you actually look into the history of production, a lot of it was just, you know, still Lucas's success, but more of his success in learning to accept and recognize the contributions of others. And so you get like this, you know, absolutely fantastic, great world and universe and stuff that Lucas created, but he created it like inherently collaboratively. And I think that's certainly true even to Toriyama to some extent, given that like some of people's favorite things are, like you said, Alfie, based on some of the suggestions of his editor. But at the same time, there is just like this underlying level of creative genius that had to have come from Toriyama to tell, like, yeah, again, two absolute blockbuster, all-time kind of ideas that made him just wealth, you know, richer than God, and just give him like such overwhelming success. Like, any of those things could have been, either of those things could have been like career setting forever, and yet he just kept going and doing just these like absolute gangbuster ideas one after the other. And the other thing that still really impresses me so much about Dragon Ball is the fact that like it's deceptively simple but wonderfully complex in its execution. But before we get into that, since that's a bit of a transition, Steve, what were you about to say?
I was just going to say, Lucas is a good comparison because you could argue someone like George Lucas and Akira Toriyama are cut from the same cloth, because it's not just the name associated with the thing they created. Their talent, both of these people, and if you go back to a lot of other people that you'd consider great in this medium, like Jack Kirby, or if you want to even throw in someone like Bram Stoker with Dracula, it wasn't so much that they had all the best ideas all the time. It's that they were masters of synthesizing multiple influences in a way that felt unique. Mm-hmm. So when you look at something in Dragon Ball, you're not just looking at Akira Toriyama coming up with ideas on the top of his head. You're looking at him being influenced by someone like Shitaro Ishimura, who created Super Sentai, or being influenced by Journey to the West, or being influenced by Hong Kong martial arts movies. The footprint of a lot of different styles of storytelling are all over Dragon Ball, and what makes Dragon Ball unique, the formula it creates for shonen battle manga, you can take each segment of it, like the transformation stuff or tournament arcs and stuff, and trace it back to things that Toriyama himself was really into when he was young that allowed him to put it into Dragon Ball. It wasn't just him inventing concepts, it was him saying, I like this, let me do my take on it.
Mm-hmm.
No, I think that's a really good way to put it, Steve, and something which I think is extremely interesting, given all of that, and when we talk about like big creative names and the George Lucas types, is you'll find them all become extremely protective of their own legacy. Like George Lucas is very famous for retroactively trying to make Star Wars even more of a like this was all a genius plan from the beginning thing, and however you take that thing. But LeBron James is like this great athlete, and he's very interested in keeping his own legacy. Michael Jordan, the same legacy. Like a lot of people who grant that level of success, kind of the celebrity and the fame and the wealth and the power and everything comes it, kind of separates you from ever being a normal human ever again in a weird way. Like you are on a different level. Like when you walk into a room with people, that there is like a different energy to you. What I love about the Toriyama story is he's probably the only dude of that status who did achieve that level of wealth and that level of influence, who always just stayed like the same dude. He always told like the same like unemployed guy who just wants to buy cigarettes. Like he doesn't really like he never changed. Like every interview you ever have him includes a self-deprecating comment. There's always the joke of Toriyama forgetting characters and forgetting he invented these things, and like he stayed everything to the last minute. There's this great little comic he wrote about his work process, about how he just pissed around his week and then had to do everything up the last minute. And man, if I don't relate to that, like that's completely like so human, so real. And the fact that even when he was in his retirement years, basically, and doing the super stuff for fun and helping out with Toyotaro, he still had that. He never once was like, my ideas are gold, my ideas are sacrosanct, you can't do this. He's always encourages, like, I don't know what the fuck I'm talking about, what do you think? And that's so incredibly rare to have with someone of that stature. And I don't think he was a perfect person. I don't think he was a role model. He was kind of creepy in a lot of ways. He was a perv. He was kind of he didn't pay his taxes on time. Like, but that's so charming in its own way as thoroughly being human. You know, thoroughly being a regular ass dude who just wanted to tell some interesting stories and make people laugh. You know, and that's really, really fascinating to me, just on the scale of, we talk a lot about like writers and creatives and historical figures. I think he's very unique for that. Like, I think it's hard to find many other examples of people who remain that down to earth.
I'd completely agree. He's got a lot of flack in recent years. I started to notice people like kind of, you know, criticizing a lot of his older work as being very dismissive. I've like seen a pretty major turn on like the Roshi character, and like that kind of more or less created that archetype within a lot of anime and shonen stuff. So it's kind of funny that, you know, his legacy is both good and possibly bad. In more ways than one. But it didn't really seem to affect him. He seems like the kind of person that was unfazed by criticism, and kind of just wanted to tell whatever story he wanted to tell, and that was the only thing he was interested in doing. Which, you know, is like, it sounds really positive, but that can be incredibly alienating. That can be incredibly just difficult to deal with on like a personal level, if you were like maybe someone who knew him or had to work with him. So it's, you know, it's really interesting and kind of complex individual in that regard. Yeah, I don't know. Where do we go next? What do we talk about next?
The thing I want to talk about then, if we've kind of talked about him as a person and all those kind of things, just the work itself. And we can talk about some of his other things like Dragon Quest, if anyone's got like experience with that, or Chrono Trigger, or Dr. Slump. But I think the main one is probably going to be Dragon Ball, which I think everyone would have doubt. But do you have any, when we say Dragon Ball, do you have any scenes or moments or characters that stick out to you as like, this fundamentally like changed, this was I'll always remember this till the day I die, this specific thing like rocks so hard, this was so sick, like specifically to that? Or again, if you've got any examples from one of his other works, feel free, but I think it's probably gonna be Dragon Ball.
Can I give you the cliche one that's like, to this day, a very Steve moment where every time I think about this, like, I just want to cry because I fucking love it so much.
Please do.
Alright, so You're gonna think this is kind of ridiculous, but surprisingly, the thing that's always stuck out to me when I try to remember like some of my favorite Dragon Ball moments, of course, is going Super Saiyan. Right? Super Saiyan's a really fun metaphor for a lot of things, but the thing that I really loved going back and watching Dragon Ball as a kid was when Vegeta first shows up as a Super Saiyan out of nowhere, and you have that small flashback sequence of how he pushed himself to get there, and you see him like desperately like on the ground like screaming, why can't he be a Super Saiyan? And then he puts himself in a situation where he will literally either die or become a Super Saiyan. And just the weight and importance that he as a character put on that moment, but also just how satisfying of a moment it is to see Vegeta's smug ass come in as a Super Saiyan and not only save Goku, but completely obliterate the thing that might have killed him. There's something so quintessentially but Dragon Ball about like that level of one-upsmanship, but also so perfectly executed in the cartooning as far as this is what makes Vegeta a fun and interesting, compelling character. And it really test the limits of like how far you're willing to go with the idea of what a Super Saiyan is supposed to be, because Goku's transformation, Gohan's transformations, they're all kind of righteous, but Vegeta's is very selfish and self-oriented, and it's not really a bad thing that it is. And the older I get, the more I learn to appreciate Vegeta's quest for power at the end of the day is really not the worst thing in the world.
Well, just to stick on that moment as well for a little bit, because I think that is a really sick choice, Steve. First of all, again, to the collaboration aspect of that, which I think is really funny, is the whole flashback sequence is entirely anime only and was not made by Toriyama.
That's like, so good,
but that's what I mean, right? Is like that's that aspect of, you think of Dragon Ball, you think of just Toriyama, but he'd be the first one to admit that a lot of things that people really remember and stuff from the anime or the games or the movies or what have you do come from collaborators, like do them for people out. Because in the manga, it's just as effective of a moment for a different reason, because it's meant to be a shock. Like in the anime, there's some build up to it. They play the music, like in the Kikuchi or in the Bruce Faulkner Vegeta theme starts good with the piano. But in the manga, it's like page turn, boom, I'm a Super Saiyan. Like what the fuck? Like it's really meant to be like that kind of reveal. But also you break it down just on craft level, because what I love doing recently, ever since the passing, is trying to divorce myself from taking Dragon Ball for granted. Like, okay, let's break down the elements. He got new outfit. This is the first time Vegeta shows up in his forever now iconic Cell Games outfit. He never wore that prior to that scene where he turns up with Android 19, kicks him in the face. What a reveal for that cool-ass look where it's the armor but sleeker. He has the moment afterwards where you have, like, Gohan, like, I thought you need to be a pure of heart to be a Super Saiyan. He's like, I am pure, evil to the core. Like, what a line. And then you got the third part where you had that thing, like, he beats the thing that beats Goku, right? Not only to rub salt in the wound, you have Piccolo, who is basically, for all intents and purposes, Toriyama's mouthpiece whenever he needs to give, like, legit exposition, which is also funny because as Toriyama's mouthpiece, Mr. Fusion's got a really fun video about that where it's like, he constantly looks like an idiot because he keeps contradicting himself, but, like, Piccolo has the line where he's like, it seems that Vegeta has even grown more powerful than Goku as a Super. It's like, whoa, okay, now you have to have that extra bit where not only do you have the gas of, like, specifically Vegeta showing up and beating the crap out of this thing, anyone who wants to put on their hat and be like, well, Goku had the heart virus. Well, he's like, I thought of that too. Here's Piccolo saying, actually, Vegeta would beat the shit out of him. It's like this great, like, combination of elements, which then also... And this is, again, how smart you gotta be to do this week to week, because he did not plan this out far ahead. You've got all this great setup for Vegeta. You've put him as high as he could ever be. He's the strongest dude. All to lead into Android 18. All to lead into the biggest fall, breaking his arm, the first time a Super Saiyan ever loses on screen. And the Goku thing happens, you got the heart virus as an excuse. Vegeta has no excuse. This is a Super Saiyan at his peak, at his prime, getting fundamentally beat up and destroyed, and it's all set up from that characterization you had from the Namek saga, from the Saiyan saga, and to do all of that so naturally to understand all of those characterization bits to make those moments hit is just man, so good. But like you said, Ian, it's deceptively simple because you just see those scenes. It's very meathead, but if you actually break it down, it takes a lot of work to make all that pay off.
Everyone and their brother likes to talk about, like, Dragon Ball is the go-to for it's dumb meathead anime where all they do is scream to power up. Like, it's such a fucking whipping boy for that. And now it's not going to be because Toriyama's passed, so now that's going to be in, like, bad taste to say, right? But, like, people love to go to that. And yet there's so many, like, absolutely brilliant themes and character work that just sets up these genius fucking payoffs for things. And that's not even getting into, like, the fundamental ideas of the story, like the fundamental beliefs and backgrounds and, like, the strive of these stories, that, like, every character in Dragon Ball is striving for something more so than any other medium, right? Like, we brought up Star Wars earlier. Sure, Palpatine's striving to become the Emperor in the prequels. Sure, Luke is striving to become a Jedi, but, like, just in that generic what is the character's motivation kind of way. Whereas Dragon Ball is, like, about the idea of to strive for things.
I mean, Dragon Ball, again, kind of going back to Toriyama's influences, you're kind of channeling that Hong Kong martial arts protagonist idea of the whole thing is just at the end of the day about willpower. It's a story where every character is just putting their will against each other, and you take that to as much of an extreme as you physically can. Like, what is a Super Saiyan or a Zenkai Boost or even Kaioken or Spirit Bomb if not just how do you manifest in physical form willpower to its furthest degree?
100%. To answer your question, Alfie, about, like, a Dragon Ball moment, I'm gonna be a little against the grain just because Steve picked a Vegeta moment, so I'm gonna go with a different one. And I'm gonna go with watching the Buu saga for the first time, the original dub, and just the moment of them all planning to go down the like reverse muscle tower, as Fusion's called it, that is Bobity's ship, and that you've set up, like, how threatening Boo and Deborah and Bobity are, and how threatening all of the Supreme Kai is, like, so worried about how powerful all of Bobity's minions are gonna be, and just this moment that, like, still is stuck with me all these years later of perfect comedy. And alright, one of you has to fight Pui Pui. Let's play rock, paper, scissors for, like, 5 minutes.
Dude, the Pui Pui Vegeta fight is still one of my favorite things in all of anime, when Pui Pui's like, on this planet we have 10 times Earth's regular gravity, and Vegeta's just like, I don't feel a thing.
Yeah. No, like, the Vegeta stuff is great, but just the look that comes on Supreme Kai's face as they start rock, paper, scissors fighting for who's gonna fuck this dude up. And just, like, the unexpected. I can't remember if it's in the original dub or not, but I think there might be, like, that might be the cliffhanger for an episode, is just them playing rock, paper, scissors. If not the episode, it's definitely a commercial break. And I just fucking adore that for the like, irreverential nature of the fucking series of, like, it doesn't matter how high the stakes are, it doesn't matter how important what's going on is, the fact that it could just, alright, this is gonna be really funny every fucking time is so great for me. I love that about his work.
That's fantastic. That whole part in the Buu saga, especially if you look at it as a conclusion, and it gets a lot of flack from people. I'm starting to see more of the tides turn, thankfully, for people appreciating the Buu saga. My friend Mizi is recently going through a Dragon Ball reread, and he's like, oh man, it's actually, there are better written parts of the series, but this is, like, the most fun part for me, because there's just so many ideas in the Buu saga, and it definitely feels like when a creative, like, he'd been doing it for so many years at that point, every week, in, out, and in, out. Like, he was justified to be like, guys, I don't have much more in me. And then when he was asked, don't have much more in me, he was like, okay, so what if I made a superhero story? Or what if I made another tournament? Or what if I made a magical horror story? Or what if I made a Raleigh but a villain? Like, that's basically what Boo is. It's like, what if I made a Raleigh, most favorite character, and made her fight the Z Fighters and beat the fuck out of them? And then what if I made Fusion? Like, the idea of fusing two characters together. Do you think how influential that is? Like, it has all the things. Dragon Ball basically started that out as time as like a mainstream thing. Obviously, the ideas always existed and different things, but the pop culture name of combining, even like people like ship names together and combine them to make the names, like Vegito, Gotenks, that's already existed before that, thanks to Dragon Ball. Again, at least in putting them into the public eye, I'll say. You've got all of these different things to come together, but one of my favorite things from the Boo saga, just as from a writing standpoint, is you get the payoff from when the escalation seemingly can get no further. Obviously, with Super now, that's changed, but at the time, Toriyama definitely intended as like, I'm just gonna have Goku and Vegeta just be the strongest dudes now, and no one else in the outside universe is prepared for that. So Supreme Kai comes in, and he's feeling hot shit. He's like, I can kill Frieza in one shot, and look at all this, look at these crazy things, let's team up on everyone. And the Goku and Vegeta this entire time are just like, man, we like gap the universe. I think we did Kakarot. I think we gapped them. It's like, damn, we weren't really trying to. We accidentally gapped the universe, huh, Vegeta? I guess we could only fight each other now. And Vegeta's like, yep. And then Goku's like, hey, I also gapped you, Vegeta, but I'm not telling you, Lamayo. Like, it's really, really funny of we get to play this constant series of we normally introduce a new character and they're far superior to the heroes. The Boo saga was the first time Toriyama kind of flipped that trope on its head as well. I was like, what if the heroes are just so strong now, the only way the villains can get a foothold is from their own personal demons, and like Vegeta's own demons undoing him, Goku's own selfishness and desire to see a next generation get stronger undoing him, Gohan's own arrogance undoing him, Gotenks' childness undoing him, and even the heroes of Earth, like their own selfishness, not letting them give the energy to Goku. The only way we can overcome that is by all coming together and admitting our faults and trying to be better people, which he does perfectly with Mr. Satan and the Thank You Dragon. Was like, so good. I'm gushing about someone else's pick. My pick, and I'll let you guys talk about this so I don't just take control of this episode. One of my favorite things, and I go back on this a lot, but my favorite fight in all of Dragon Ball is also my favorite moment in all of Dragon Ball, and that is the Goku versus Frieza fight in the manga on Namek. The whole thing, not just when Goku goes Super Saiyan, like, I honestly like the first half of that even more, before Goku goes Super Saiyan and he fights Frieza.
It's fucking top tier, man. Like, there's not before and not ever since the Frieza fight has it felt more like this is just not going to be possible. The series is going to end on a fucking downer because Goku is going to die. The man pulls out every fucking trick in the book against Frieza. Every trick he's learned throughout his entire career. He, shows up on Namek and he's just so much stronger than everybody else. It's not even funny. I still really like the TFS bit where he shows up on Namek and just beats the shit out of the Ginyu Force. It's like, Vegeta, these guys are giving you trouble? Like, it's just so fucking dirty. But, like, and all that, he just keeps throwing everything at Frieza. The 20 times Kaioken, the Spirit Bomb, the, like, surprise Kamehamehas. And, like, most importantly about those aspects is just all of them land. It's not like Frieza, like, sneaks away from one or like misses one by the hair on his chin, right? Like Goku gets him with every single one of his fucking tricks. They all work, and it doesn't matter because he's just that fucking outclassed, and it's just so goddamn good.
It's masterful in how much he's able to like make it steadily escalate over and over and over again. Because you open with Goku showing up and being able to deflect Frieza's little death beams. And when that fight starts, you don't necessarily get the sense that Frieza is toying with him, but it goes to that degree very quickly. And watching Goku go from so confident when he steps in to more of that Dragon Ball characterization where he's tactical and really smart about his fighting choices, and then just progressively throwing everything against the wall chapter after chapter after chapter, and nothing works. That image of Goku like on his knees and Frieza holding him up with his tail around his neck, that's haunting, like in that moment, because you think Goku's legit gonna die.
Mm-hmm. Again, like, just the fact that, you know, it's so funny to me because the Spirit Bomb literally never works until Boo. But, like, it's the biggest fucking thing ever, and you see Frieza, like, trying to push against it, and then he just gets consumed, and it goes into the planet, and you get, like, oh man, it all worked. Vegeta didn't know what he was talking about with all that Super Saiyan stuff. He was just deluding himself, and then, like, it's that moment after when Gohan, or what, not Gohan, when Krillin dies, when Piccolo almost eats it, and then just that's the thing that you get that page turn. And I've like read the Toriyama interviews where he talks about like the whole fight was just building to that fucking Bruce Lee look of Goku going Super Saiyan, and then shit, I've got to make him fight to conclude it. I don't even know what to do anymore.
It's like it still does great. No, but that look is so transcendent. Like that's where Supersonic comes from, right? Like that's where every kind of like heroic last minute reversal surge of angelic power seems to come from is the Super Saiyan. The thing I want to talk about specifically from it kind of gets kind of underrated is, and this is very sure to what I think the greatest strength of Toriyama as a writer, I think, is his characterization. I think he's extremely good at writing dialogue. I think he's extremely good at using the small amount of space to make very interesting and compelling dynamics. And nothing is clearer with that for me than Goku versus Frieza. Because a lot of people, if you just wrote it down on paper, is like, man, Goku doesn't even meet Frieza until they start fighting in their final fight. Right? And I've heard that as a critique. I've heard this thing. No, shut up. You don't know what you're talking about. Read the fight, meet, and then through the course of their fight, Goku turns to... So from Frieza's perspective, he's like, okay, another Saiyan has survived. A curiosity. Okay, if you can block my beams. Intriguing. Has some fun. Unlike Vegeta, where there's like emotional baggage, Frieza actually kind of seems to like Goku at first, because like he's like, he doesn't really care about like he wants some revenge and stuff. So he wants to fight me, but like he's laughing with me. We're both smiling, like we're batting away our attacks. This is fun. Like I get to stretch my legs a little bit. Everyone else is a little too serious. This guy can play with me. Then he starts landing on more hits than Frieza's comfortable with, and he just won't go away when his time's like, alright now, you've had your fun, stop playing with me, ha ha ha. Monkey stop, and he keeps coming back, he's pissing him off, he's like, alright, I'm gonna fucking actually start trying now. Beats the shit out of Goku, he's like, alright, you're kind of disappointing, gonna end it. Does the Spirit Bomb thing, starts losing his shit because these people keep coming back and they won't die. Hits the Spirit Bomb. He has Frieza taste fear for the first time, but he's like, what the fuck was that? I almost died. And then he becomes the Super Saiyan, the thing he was scared of his entire life. And you do this arc where they meet and they start from this kind of fight banter to by the end of the fight, Frieza is cut in half, and you fully believe this man hates this other man more than any other human being or alien has ever hated something in that life. That is a masterful writing. Like, to be able to take Frieza from that camaraderie, kind of charismatic back and forth confidence to the level of despise and hatred that normally will take other writers entire arcs or entire long drawn out sagas to get that level of venom. But no one, not even people who don't like Dragon Ball, can argue that when Frieza looks at Goku as a Super Saiyan, that is pure, utter, shaking with madness hatred, right?
Well,
and you only get that through the course of one single fight.
Well, and also think about like trying to top yourself in that moment too, right? Because you're right, because Toriyama's really good at that stuff. But imagine spending the entire Namek saga building up Frieza as the most terrifying, powerful thing in the whole universe, and then getting yourself in the position where you actually have to now write that moment where he takes on all of your heroes, and then having to deliver on the idea that he's actually more terrifying and more powerful than anyone you've ever seen, and being able to set that up over and over and over again and make Frieza always come out on top, and then getting to that Goku fight and knowing that you've set yourself up for failure almost because you've set up the expectations of Frieza so high, and still being able to deliver that ultimate underdog win for Goku in a way that shouldn't be possible on paper.
No, it's fantastic. Like, again, it's so... Again, that's what I mean by taking Dragon Ball for granted, right? Because everyone knows the story of Dragon Ball. It's so impossible to go into it fully blind, right? But if you asked someone when this was coming out, right, just the chapters were coming out, and you had the start of the Namek arc, I don't think anyone could predict that Vegeta would beg Goku to continue on his legacy and fight for him, that Piccolo would come back stronger than ever and fuse with someone, and that the Frieza-Goku fight would end with Frieza begging Goku for his life and asking for mercy, which Goku would then return and walk away, and then Frieza throwing that back in his face, and then the planet blows up. Like, you can't call that shit. Like, we take it so for granted because we know in our bones and everything's played on the phone, but like, just from like a how did we get here like moment, it's kind of insane.
There's a lot of little moments.
Dude, I remember watching the original dub as that was coming out with like all the Namek stuff, because that's when I like caught up with the series, right? Getting through Namek and the fight with Frieza and just everything that kept like leading to, and just yeah, there's like it's a magic to it of just masterful storytelling. It's arguably like, you know, everyone's got their favorite arc, their favorite character or whatever. I do think that arguably the Frieza saga is just the objectively best told story in the entirety of Dragon Ball. It's just so perfectly done and hypes up and just leads everything together so wonderfully. Again, to bring up the Star Wars thing, it's not my favorite, but it is like the empire of the fucking series.
For sure.
Outside of that, I guess, just to get a complete view, unless anyone else has any ideas they want to take it first.
In terms of Dragon Ball or in terms of Toriyama?
In terms of anything, yeah, Toriyama, anything specific.
Do you guys have like a favorite gag throughout Dragon Ball? Like we're talking a lot about the like dramatic side of the storytelling, but one thing that I do think is just really understated is the ease at which humor is introduced into the series and is like a part of it throughout. The thing started more as a gag manga and kind of became an action adventure series that and like certainly became more well known as action adventure, but like never really lost the comedy.
Mine's got to be all of the Super Sentai jokes in everything that he does. Like, not even the Ginyu Force, right? Like, the Ginyu Force is funny as fuck for existing, but then, like, fucking Gotenks with the Super Ghost Kamikaze attack. Toriyama, for some reason, loves just throwing in, like, random Sentai bullshit attack names or random Sentai poses and stuff, like fucking Great Saiyaman, too. I love that. I think it's hilarious. To be honest with you, the Great Saiyaman Teen Gohan stuff that's in the anime is some of my favorite Dragon Ball. I think it's so good because it basically just turns into a superhero story for a little bit. But then the Ginyu Force in particular, when they show up on Namek, and they're fucking freaks, right? Like, they're just posing and they got these little tighty whities on and they're like yelling out catchphrases and shit and they're all coordinated dancing, and then they're just like the most terrifying fighting force you've ever seen. It's so funny. I love it so much.
They're so good.
Oh, it's hilarious.
I think for me, the one I want to talk about is much more recent, but it just God, it just got me so good. The first time I saw the fucking movie, and it was the it's kind of twofold because it's the same fucking joke, but just the two completely different characters. Is in Battle of Gods and Resurrection F with the wait, Lord Beerus is here from fucking Shenron and Frieza. It's just the funniest shit in the world. Oh shit, Beerus is here. It's just so good. Lord Beerus, I'm sorry. I don't mean to look down at you. It's just I am so big. Yes, I understand. So good. Everyone's so fucking intimidated by Beerus in those first two movies, and I just love it. Like, I understand that people get like shitty with Beerus sticking around with the main crew and stuff, but no, just for those moments, it just makes it so worthwhile to me. It's like everyone goes, "Oh, the same fucking jokes over and over again." Like, I don't care. You could make the same fucking Beerus and Whis jokes all day. I will never care. I love it so much.
A lot of my favorite ones, it's just so hard to choose, man. It's like spoilt for choice. One of the best ones for me, I think, is it, kind of moving. It's still Dragon Ball adjacent, but like something I think is very underrated is in the Jocko manga. That whole thing is just so funny. I really hope it gets adapted into something one day, as like an OVA or miniseries or something. But there's a part where Jocko's like just going through his pockets, and like the guy's like, "Oh yeah, we're trying to find something," and he like flips something out of his pocket. He's like, "Oh, whoops! I almost dropped that. That would have been really bad for you guys." He's like, "What do you have?" It's like, it's called the Human Race Extinction Bomb. I should really keep that a safety on that or something." Like it's just so random. It's like super dry, and just move past it. Like Toriyama, I think is so good at like matter of fact gags, and he never stays on the joke. He always moves on like a page later. Like it's never like, pay attention to me, I did a funny. It's like they come at you really fast and they move on. Another one that I think is really underrated because the moment before it is so dramatic is when Goku sacrifices himself against Cell, right? And like he's like does this heartfelt speech to Gohan, and everyone's like, "Oh, Goku, no!" And he just turns up at King Kai's place, and he's like, sorry, man, this is the safest place I had to go. Sorry, I'm gonna die now." King Kai's like, "Goku, what the fuck?" And it is entirely played as a gag, and that tonal whiplash, I think, is so pure to the heart of Dragon Ball, of being able to do that within the same 2 pages, right? To be able to do the heartfelt hero says goodbye, and then the "oh my god, Goku, you're such a fucking asshole. You just killed me for no reason." Like, that's super, super funny. Another one that I think is really underrated in original Dragon Ball, is when they bring, and they do a similar part in Super with this, but in the original Dragon Ball, when they're doing the World Tournament for the first time, and they're like, "Alright, we're gonna sing the national anthem, we're gonna have the martial arts presiding monk come in and say his great words to celebrate this amazing event," and it's like this dog person, and he walks on, and then the announcer's like, "Okay, everyone, please, if you would, for the Honorable Master." And it's just a single panel where he's like, "Woof," and it's like, "Thank you, Honorable Master, you've said as well." Like, it's so stupid. But it's so good.
So good. Oh my god, I love it.
Some of that stuff's really good, and I really appreciate, again, like Ian said, with like the super stuff we got with the Beerus Gokes, and as we go in, the infernal naming of forms. I've really grown to like the orange Piccolo just being randomly thrown in there by Piccolo. It's very much Toriyama's, like, that's his thought process. I'm like, I guess a color and a name. Like, I'm just like, I really appreciate how honest he is about that. So many good jags. Like, again, you could go for the entirety of Dragon Ball and only skip the fight and only read the humor, and you'd still have a fantastic time.
100% agree. All right. Do you want to take us somewhere else then, Alfie?
I feel that covers a lot of what I wanted to talk about. I guess the one thing, just as an artist, and I think it's important when we're taking from these legacies, not just to praise, but also to look at what we would like to see improved on in the future, what the lessons to be learned is. What would you guys think we should learn from Toriyama, and maybe not just the positive sense? Like, what do you think are maybe some of the things, mistakes or flaws he made along the way that future generations will be like, okay, maybe I won't take this direction, or maybe I'll add this, or do you think that's something where that's just part of the charm as well?
I don't know if this is necessarily a Toriyama fault, although he does lean into it, because there's a reason he's the blueprint for shonen battle manga. It's because he perfects it and repeats it so often. But I think when you look at the modern landscape of anime, if you were just going from Dragon Ball to One Piece, Bleach, Naruto to now like Boruto and Bleach Thousand Year Blood War to like Jujutsu Kaisen and Demon Slayer and all that shit, right? Like, if you're just following this genre, I could understand how you get to the end of the current line and be like, fuck Dragon Ball. Why do we just keep doing this over and over and over again? I wish it never existed. Because the formula has become so insanely repetitive. And the thing about that Toriyama does really well, that I think his legacy doesn't reflect properly, is what I mentioned earlier about him synthesizing influences outside of just his own immediate culture. And as Dragon Ball became more and more popular and the Shonen Battle manga became more of a marketable brand, the mangakas that came after him became less and less equipped to do that, or less and less willing to do that. I'm not saying Demon Slayer is the worst thing ever, but Demon Slayer really kind of sucks because it's the most generic battle manga thing ever. What was really interesting about the immediate aftermath of Dragon Ball is when you go from something like Dragon Ball to something like Yu Yu Hakusho, you have the manga writer taking advantage of the new genre that was created and then forcing the characters in the world to transcend beyond that, because you had a whole arc in the Chapter Black Saga in Yu Yu Hakusho where Yusuke is basically just talking about how insane it is that we keep repeating this cycle, how this formula doesn't seem like it works, and at a certain point you really either just have to doom yourself to repeat it forever or just die. And if that's the future of all the characters in this world, then why even bother keep going? And then, of course, he was forced to keep going and do the exact same thing in the next arc. And it's a really sort of sad irony to that whole thing. I think the trouble we'll run into in a post-Toriyama Dragon Ball world is we might get into the zone where we're afraid of breaking the mold. Toriyama worked because he was not immediately successful and because he didn't set out to be successful. He just wanted to do something he enjoyed. And he borrowed from things that he learned and experienced along his whole life. The more popular Dragon Ball became, the more closed off the entire ecosystem of shonen battle manga has become. And I think now that Toriyama's gone, and it's kind of a bookend on that saga, I would very much appreciate if the next thing to come out was not influenced directly by Dragon Ball.
Yeah, kind of on a similar vibe to you, Steve. I'm gonna just talk about what was always my biggest disappointment when I was initially watching Dragon Ball with the original dub, and what kind of has remained like the biggest problem I had with the series for years and years now, which is we talked earlier about just how fantastic and how amazing and how like hype it was to get to Super Saiyan against Frieza, and it's like this legendary thing. And I just always remember being so disappointed that the Android and Cell saga just kind of immediately like overwrote the importance of Super Saiyan, and it just became about let's get to Super Saiyan 2 now. And that be kind of, I think he ultimately ended up fixing that with Boo in a way that I didn't really appreciate when I was younger, but like I grew to appreciate more as I spent more time with the series and stuff. And that the third thing of, oh, now we got to get to this level of Super Saiyan absolutely does not work. and Super Saiyan 3 ends up being like kind of useless. Like it keeps them in the fight a little bit longer, but it doesn't actually save the day like Super Saiyan 2 does in the Cell Saga. So for me, I think that like similar to you with stuff that has been so fundamentally influenced by Dragon Ball is that tendency to just constantly chase the next big thing, but not let the catharsis, let the importance of the last story and what that achievement meant sink in. And this isn't just a shonen specific thing. I like I'm a big Green Lantern fan, and I really, really like Jeff Johns' run, but the thing I've talked about in the past is I really, really like Blackest Night, but it doesn't actually have an ending. It just kind of becomes the Brightest Day storyline, and then the like every arc after Blackest Night has that same problem where they don't really have a proper ending. They just kind of lead into the next one, and you don't get the catharsis of the endings from those arcs, and it just begins to feel like fundamentally unsatisfying, and like it wasn't like you're not reaching the mountain top. You're just going to, you know, the next rise, and then there's more mountain to climb. So in storytelling, just letting an ending hit as an ending, like if you plan to have more of your story, sure, that's great, that's fine. Set up whatever you need to set up, but let your ending be an ending. Don't fall into the trap of just continually leading the reader or the viewer on.
Bleach has this real bad. Like, every arc is just like, Ichigo has lost his Bankai. Anyway, here's Ichigo getting a new, cooler Bankai.
I mean, like, I think a lot of stuff has this. You guys played the God of War games, right?
Yeah.
Like the original 3?
Yeah.
I don't know if the Norse has this, but like God of War 2, like God of War 2 is a little bit better because like at least it's an epic like fight that it happens in and stuff, and you've got to like pour energy and blah blah blah. Like it's a little bit better. God of War 3 is the like lamest fucking thing where you just fall down a fucking mountain like a bitch.
All the God of War games, I haven't played the newest one, but all the God of War games have that weird sort of repetitiveness to them where like, well, Kratos can't actually accomplish his mission even though he did in the last game, so let's do it all over again.
I mean, it's just like feels underwhelming. Because you go through so much in God of War 2, right, to like get up to this level of power where you can like raise the Titans and challenge the gods, and then it's just like all fucking gone in like 5 minutes into the next game, and it just feels like, well, fuck, why don't I get to fight him like I was at the end of 2? That's the fucking mod I want someone to do all these years later. I could take God of War 3. Yeah, but just have it with all of your powers from the end of God of War 2.
God of War 2.
Like, I want to play that game.
That's understandable.
Yeah. But like that vibe, as I do think, and I have always thought, you know, I didn't always have the words for it, but I just always remember like that disappointment in the Cell arc being about getting Super Saiyan 2, and that just always really was underwhelming to me. And it's also why I kind of like the Boo stuff more, because, you know, they start the Super Saiyan 3 thing, and you think it's going to be about that, but ultimately it's not. It's just another false avenue that they throw in that story, which is the thing that annoys a lot of people, is it's telegraphs of, oh, Super Saiyan 3 is going to be the ultimate thing. Nah, wait, Fusion's going to be the ultimate thing. Nah, wait, this is it just fucking keeps fucking up for him. It's beautiful.
Super kind of has that for me, honestly, where it just gets to a point where I'm like, okay, enough with these godforsaken transformations.
Yeah. It's getting kind of up there. That's fair. All right. Are we done?
Did Alfie,
do we think
give
Alfie
his
did?
criticism?
Yeah.
Yeah. What's your criticism?
I'll give
Alfie?
mine and then we'll wrap it up. For me, I guess my point is kind of similar to what Steve said, but I also think this is a little case in this makes a little bit of the sadder thing with Toriyama is I brought up at the front as like being a positive with how self-deprecating he was with his work and how he kind of didn't view himself as. I do hope he realized how much he meant to people with Dragon Ball and how much people actually did value and view his ideas. Like, maybe we'll never know that for sure. Maybe Toyotaro really did just gush to him one day and managed to get some of that view because I knew he was a very private person, doesn't really see his thing. And he seemed to get really excited when he was invited to the movie premieres. Like, he talked about how much of a good time he had with Superhero, and he never imagined his work going that way and stuff like that. So I just would encourage young artists and stuff to stay humble, but don't be that self-deprecative. Like, don't always beat yourself up and value yourself with the critiques. Like, listen to the critiques, but at the end of the day, you've got to have a little bit of unfounded confidence to go out there and make these things in the first place. And I think Toriyama definitely had that when he was younger, but I do think as the days went on, especially when he was in retirement, he did lose a little bit of that, and he did maybe get into a little bit of, like, well, I only created Dragon Ball, I didn't really have that much of an impact thing. And I would emphasize, if you ever create something as crazy good as Dragon Ball, to be proud of that and to recognize it, to be how powerful that is for people. So I hope that got through to him. I hope he was just mostly making jokes, but that's something I think is really important, just from artists to each other, is I think we can be really mean to ourselves and our own work. So I'm going to try and be nicer about my own work. And I would hope anyone listens to this who is creative would also try to be nicer about their own work. And you can still critique yourself, but you're only going to serve to make yourself more depressed if you're people are going to beat you up anyway for it. Like, why are you going to beat yourself up as well? Like, to add to that. To a craft point, though, one thing I also want to mention is Toriyama, I still think, is the gold standard of sequential action and sequential art in terms of just progressing movement, fight choreography, especially at his peak, which I think is from around the last Budokai through to the Saiyan Saga, Namek Saga, is where I think he was at his absolute prime of artistic powers. Like, every single fight in that is like the greatest fight ever put to comics, and then it's surpassed by the very next one. Like, just look at the pages of Krillin versus Nappa, and you'd think that was the climactic fight of a masterwork graphic novel. You're like, oh no, that was like the side character surviving, and that was the Goku Vegeta fight. It's like, whoa, what the fuck? Like, it's crazy how like each one is so good in that period. Goku versus Tien in the 23rd tournament is, oh my god. It's more animated than the anime is. Like, that's how amazingly drawn it is. But I with all that hype being said, it's not unsurpassable. Don't put it on a pedestal to something you can never beat. There are plenty of flaws within Toriyama's work, anatomically, paneling-wise. He's never really been able to take his work to be colored particularly well in terms of other artists doing it. His color pages were pretty good, but it's always something that has kind of struggled in that translation process. So there's a lot of other aspects, like backgrounds disappear and stuff, and readability. Like, I think, look at it as a goal to surpass.
The dependence on samey landscapes, right. The fact that everything takes place in a vast wilderness, kind of wasteland.
That would be something where I'd like look at this as the great work of someone who had to do this every week. And if you don't have those constraints, and if you are an artist, you can aim for that. Take the Goku mentality of not being happy to just look at someone stronger than you. I want to beat that guy. I want to be better than that, because that's what I think Dragon Ball is about, is being better than you were the day before. So all this wonderful stuff about Toriyama, don't let that put a limit on your own powers. Let's do better, right? Let's take these foundations, and in the next 30 years, let's see what crazy stuff we can make, right? Like, I think that's really exciting, and I would hope Toyotaro takes that mentality. I would hope the people in charge at Shueisha with Dragon Ball and Toei, I hope they take that mentality. I really hope they don't just end Dragon Ball soon out of reverence for that. I really do think this would be a great opportunity to have new voices on the material in the same way a character like Batman or Superman have had. and just see where it goes, while still being respectful to obviously Toriyama's legacy. But I think it's important to things can have an ending, but it shouldn't be ended out of the idea of, well, this is the best it could ever be, because I think that's kind of antithetical to the work the creator was trying to say. Is no, even if it doesn't have to be Dragon Ball itself, if it's another artist who's young, who grows up reading this and goes to Shonen Jump and makes his own thing, I would like, or he or her, I would like to see that, you know. I would like to see those ideas be surpassed. And like Steve mentioned with like Demon Slayer and stuff, let's not just fall back on the tropes. Let's make some new tropes. Let's make some new iconic moments.
Agreed, 100%. All right. Well, I think that's about all we've got for this one. It was a really, really tragic loss. Honestly, he wasn't. He certainly wasn't like a young man or anything, but he really was not that old.
68 was not that. He's too young. He's too young.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. It was very disappointing news. So everyone, thanks so much for watching. I don't know what we're going to talk about next time, but I don't really feel like ending the episode on a umming and humming, so you'll find out next week when the episode gets posted. Until next time, everyone, I'm the Philosopher.
And thank you, Dragon Balls.
Yeah, thank you, Dragon Ball.
And we are your geeky gentlemen, and we will be discussing things.